We'll now be pleased to hear from Spencer Kraus from Scripture Central and Alan Hansen, an independent scholar. And the title of their presentation will be Abraham, Man of Perfect Faith. Spencer graduated from Brigham Young University with a bachelor's degree in computer science, modern Hebrew, and ancient Near Eastern studies. He works with Scripture Central as a researcher and with Dr. Lincoln Blumell on topics related to early Christianity and the New Testament. Alan Hansen is an independent researcher born and raised in northern Israel. He served a mission in Russia and married Katerina from Ukraine. They are the parents to a daughter. His research interests include the Bible, ancient, medieval, and early modern Jewish literature, Book of Mormon translation, and the meeting points between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Judaism, and the history of Israel. So we'll turn the time over to Spencer and Alan.
As Hugh Nibley discussed the Book of Jasher in 1967, he stated, "The time is ripe for a fresh investigation of such genuine sources of Scripture. Despite its high appraisal, relatively little has been done to better examine the Book of Jasher as a genuine source of ancient traditions and Scripture. The most extensive review of the Book of Jasher from a Latter-day Saint perspective appeared in 1976, and less than 24 other works have appeared in the following years. We believe the time is still ripe for a fresh investigation of the Book of Jasher, and we believe we will be able to offer one in coming months." The Book of Jasher, it has been familiar to Latter-day Saints ever since its initial publication in 1840. It would even be published by J.H. Perry, a Latter-day Saint residing at Salt Lake City in 1887, and it was assumed that this may be one of the lost books of Scripture mentioned in the Old Testament, specifically Joshua 10:13 and 2 Samuel 1:18. While the prospect of having found a lost book of the Bible is tantalizing, scholars have long since recognized the Book of Jasher is a late medieval work and almost certainly not the same Book of Jasher mentioned in the Bible. What makes this work so interesting, however, lies not in its supposed antiquity, but in how the Book of Jasher utilizes other ancient and even later sources in crafting its narrative. This is precisely the reason that led Nibley to declare that the time is ripe for a fresh investigation of the Book of Jasher despite its late creation, saying the presence in medieval Book of Jasher passages paralleling parts of the Testament of Judah would indicate not all their matter is late or forged. This book, read by many Latter-day Saints, still has to be examined line by line on the basis of Doctrine and Covenants 91. The author of Jasher was undoubtedly highly educated, given his extensive knowledge of the rabbinic agadic corpus, the work of biblical exegetes, and his grasp of non-Jewish literary forms and conventions. Indeed, much of Jasher's narrative can be traced to various Jewish legends from the early centuries AD and perhaps even earlier. As such, the material it incorporates, though not found in the Bible itself, can often be viewed as authentically ancient in scope, even if the completed book itself is not ancient. The author of Jasher also seems to hail from the late medieval cultural world of Iberia and the Western Mediterranean. Thus, even when utilizing sources from antiquity, he was still able to craft his narrative utilizing his own time and place in the late medieval world. As such, occasionally some features of the text arise that can only be explained when the completed work is viewed as a medieval composition. For instance, Nibley also noted that the picture of Abraham in Beersheba reflects actual conditions of the city in the Holy Land, not necessarily at Abraham's time, but at the time of its writing. In a forthcoming work, we'll better contextualize what Jasher is, why it's written, and how Latter-day Saints today can better appreciate and utilize the text while recognizing it is not an ancient document. Today, however, while we will focus on one aspect of the Book of Jasher, specifically its retelling of the story of Abraham, it is worth a brief introduction to what kind of book Jasher is, so we can better appreciate how it interprets and reinterprets that story. So if Jasher is not a biblical book left out of the canon, nor ancient apocrypha or pseudepigrapha, despite containing such elements, what kind of book is it? While Jasher is a history and can be called such, we feel it is better understood as a Jewish form of chivalric romance where the heroes are not the warriors of ancient Troy or the knights of King Arthur's court, but the biblical fathers of the covenant people Israel. On the basis of internal and external clues, Joseph Dan proposed that Jasher was written in the Spanish-ruled kingdom of Naples toward the end of the 15th century at the earliest. Give or take a few years, this is our working assumption as well, placing the composition of Jasher in the late medieval period. This was an era of great upheaval, trade, discovery, and imperial expansion. The neglected introduction to Jasher relates how the manuscript was found. A Jew from North Africa, Rabbi Joseph ben Samuel, traveled to Venice in the 17th century with an old, yellowed, and frayed manuscript. He was one interested in gaining wisdom throughout his life. When he saw various manuscripts in danger of being destroyed, he did what he could to save them. One of these books was the Book of Jasher, which he was determined to print and share with the world. This book began with a prologue that told a fantastical tale of the book's preservation from Titus's siege of Jerusalem in about AD 70. When taken on its own, this prologue has led many to erroneously believe that Jasher is actually an ancient book, but doing so is a mistake. Even Rabbi Joseph did not attribute it to ancient authors. From the last paragraph of his introduction, it is clear he sees in the book a compilation of medieval, exegetical, and homiletical commentaries, and not the work of ancients identical or close to the Book of Jasher mentioned in the Bible and used as its source. Other rabbis likewise saw an error in separating the prologue from the context and content of Jasher, as it would lead others to erroneously believe this book is ancient. Dan also notes that many such books were shared widely even before Rabbi Joseph printed the Book of Jasher, and once Jasher was printed, it was widely distributed and extremely popular. However, prior to its publication, it is only known through a single manuscript that was saved by Rabbi Joseph and his book-loving family. If the prologue was to be believed, this would be an anomaly, as no other manuscripts have ever come to light closely resembling this book. While not impossible, the painting many readers have of an ancient Jasher is further complicated when it is recognized that Jasher incorporates Islamic legends into its pages, including a legend regarding the birth of Abraham, dating to the 8th through 11th centuries AD. Indeed, the Book of Jasher, prologue included, shows many additional signs of being written well after Titus's siege of Jerusalem. These factors lead scholars such as Dan to date the Book of Jasher as a late medieval work. The kind of work we place it as, specifically a medieval romance, best explains all of these features presented to us in Jasher's pages. We have not been the only Latter-day Saint scholars to identify its genre as such either. Indeed, Hugh Nibley noted that because the Book of Jasher used very ancient sources, it was by nature far more than a medieval romance. This high appraisal will be apparent as Jasher, a work connecting antiquity with the author's own time, is fully understood through its context, genre, and sources. The chivalric romance genre was especially popular during the high and late medieval periods, that's about AD 1000 to 1500. In the early 16th century, these were still tremendously popular reading. In their heyday, over 86,000 romances were printed in Spain alone. There are many others printed throughout the rest of Europe. This makes such books among the most popular and readily available works in early modern Europe. Their influence on wider society is tremendous, and it did not leave the Jewish world indifferent. There were various Arthurian, Carolinian, and courtly romances in Hebrew. Many were prose adaptations of Christian works, whereas others emerged entirely within Judaism. A central source for Jasher, called the Book of Josephon, was a Hebrew reworking of Josephus from Byzantine Italy or Sicily sometime during the 10th century AD that also contained many chivalric episodes fitting this medieval context. This was as native a Jewish mode of expression as it was a broader European one. With the resurgent commercial interest in the form brought about by the printing revolution, Jewish printers also got in on the act of translating and adapting other well-known romances for their community. The Soncinos brought a copy of the Amadis of Gaul, the most popular Iberian romance, which they had translated by a member of the Sephardic diaspora and published sometime in the 1520s. This can help us glimpse the probable cultural context of that unknown author and his intended audience. The Amadis is an action-packed story of a wandering knight, paragon of virtue, who is motivated by courtly love in his struggle with the evils of his time. The Hebrew Amadis proved extremely popular. However, in addition to merely being a popular genre among Jewish audiences during this time, there are also two key reasons why the chivalric romance could have served as the preferred genre for Jasher. First, the romance was widely considered as a suitable vehicle for conveying spiritual truths because a discerning reader would be drawn in by the adventurous plot, but then begin to seek the wisdom and meaning concealed therein. Rather than simply share an entertaining story, these works could be used as vehicles for deeper truths to enter the audience's hearts and conversations. For example, to justify printing the Amadis of Gaul and stave off objections of frivolity, the introduction to the Hebrew Amadis emphasizes the moral and didactic value for those willing to delve deeper, saying this book will be of great utility to any who read it, and, as one will see by reading it, the book will soothe the soul more than the historical chronicles or the Book of Ben-Gurion could. Following this pattern established by other medieval romances, the Book of Jasher lists 13 virtues or values for the reader in its prologue, although in reality only 12 are named. And these virtues emphasize why this work is important and what spiritual lessons its readers may learn. Each virtue follows a brief summary of a biblical account that has been expanded in Jasher, intending to cement in the reader's minds the moral lessons that this book intended to convey. It is clear that the man who rescued the manuscript of Jasher and helped bring it to print valued it as an entertaining compendium of profound rabbinic teachings. Second, the romance genre was used especially to draw readers' minds to the past and remember the great glories of previous generations, whether they be knights, kings, or in Jasher's case, honored patriarchs. The biblical narratives and their post or extra-biblical traditions were a surprisingly fertile soil for fashioning an epic romance. There are many common elements suggesting such to an author of the late medieval. To focus on Abraham, he was a warrior, generous and magnanimous. He's forced to flee his home twice and endure multiple trials and perils. Extra-biblical traditions added a miraculous birth, something characteristic of many heroes of romance, and these traditions greatly fleshed out incidents in his life. Abraham is the first great figure of Israel, founder of the nation, father of the faithful, and, to borrow an apt image from Kierkegaard, the knight of faith. Sarah plays a prominent part in this narrative cycle too. This is one of the great love stories of the Bible and a favorite topic for later elaboration. The central elements for a romantic treatment of Abraham were already in place by the 15th and 16th centuries. Jews had their own El Cid, their own Amadis, their own Belianis to be proud of. Abraham maintained all the virtues people were meant to remember and emulate. They just needed to be brought to life on the page. There were real and tangible lessons in which the chivalric romance could be especially powerful in delivery for many readers. The chivalric themes unite especially in one of Jasher's retellings of Abraham's early life, offering a fresh look at the older legends it incorporates. And for this, I will apologize. We already got a bit of a primer through Dan Peterson's work on this in how these legends are incorporated into the Quranic retellings. This story will be the focus of our present analysis. Jasher draws heavily from ancient traditions that detail the attempted sacrifice of Abraham by the wicked king Nimrod. This story, especially as told by the author of Jasher, underscores one underlying purpose: to show Abraham was a man of perfect faith, and it was this very faith that saved him. Generally speaking, these legends reflect the same details, though each do so in unique ways. While this story is related in multiple texts, we can only briefly examine one here. we will look at Genesis Rabbah, which is generally dated to the 5th or 6th centuries AD. This midrash relates many of the general points that are covered in other texts. According to Genesis Rabbah, Abraham's father Terah worshipped and sold idols. One day, in an effort to convince his father to no longer follow these idols, Abraham arose, took a club in his hand, shattered all the idols, and placed the club in the hand of the largest among them. When his father sees what has happened, he asks Abraham who destroyed his idols. Abraham naturally blames the idol who's holding the club, saying, this idol, was angry at the other ones because they wanted to eat of the offering first. So he took this club and smashed them all to pieces. Terah's not so easily moved when the logical discrepancy is pointed out to him that, well, if this idol can't actually do anything, why do you worship it? So he delivered Abraham to the wicked king Nimrod. After an unsuccessful attempt to get Abraham to worship the fire, Nimrod declared, "I bow down only to fire. I will cast you into it, and let that God to whom you bow down come and rescue you from it." Not much is said as to how Abraham was saved from the furnace apart from a simple statement. Abraham descended into the fiery furnace and was rescued. One unfortunate side effect of this encounter is found in Abraham's brother Haran. Fickle in his devotion to either Nimrod or his brother, he thought, if Abraham is victorious, I will say I'm with Abraham. And if Nimrod is victorious, I will say I'm with Nimrod. When Abraham was rescued, he declared to be with Abraham. For this, they took him and cast him into the fire, and his innards were scorched. He emerged and died in the presence of Terah, his father. The Book of Jasher expands and shapes the traditional narrative in ways that present Abraham as a man of perfect faith. While these sources that Jasher incorporated naturally dealt with Abraham's faith and refusal to worship idols, these themes are more prominent in Jasher, and his faith in God is made even more explicit throughout the entire narrative. In Jasher, Terah, Abraham's father, is not some simple purveyor of idols as he is in many of the Midrashim. In keeping with the conventions of chivalric romance, he is elevated to be a trusted general in Nimrod's kingdom, saying, "And he placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his host, and he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes." The ensuing drama will take place in the highest levels of grand society, in the king's own court, a setting typical for the medieval romance's tale of knights and kings. A second significant addition to this legend is found in Jasher, namely Abraham's birth is accompanied by strange signs of the heavens. The king's advisors correctly interpret this as Terah's son overcoming the king in the future. They advised that the infant be killed. Terah, however, took Abraham, his son, secretly, together with his mother and nurse, and he concealed them in a cave, and he brought them their provisions monthly. Abraham leaves the cave at the age of 10 and studies the Torah with Noah and Shem for 39 years. He is described as knowing God since the age of 3 and always walking perfectly in his paths. This is a significant expansion to the legends of Abraham and the furnace that is attested only in later traditions, in this case especially Islamic traditions from the 8th through 11th centuries AD. Furthermore, not only do all other Jewish writings that use this motif post-date the Muslim conquest, they also all come from Muslim-influenced areas, which Sharia Lowen and others have used to suggest that these legends were influenced or borrowed from the Islamic sources. However, even when adapting later sources, the author of Jasher is still able to tie these in neatly to his wider argument. Furthermore, Abraham's childhood is detailed more closely as a boy who constantly sought to follow God and exercise faith in him, as he learned from Noah and Shem personally. Whereas the more ancient Jewish traditions Jasher drew from tended to emphasize that Abraham learned of God through his reason and study of the stars and planets, as Stephen and others have discussed last week. It is this faith that catapults him to the confrontation with his father prominent in the more ancient Jewish sources. However, even as the more ancient sources are utilized, they are introduced in a way thoroughly characteristic of a medieval romance. In addition to taking place in the highest levels of society, many romances often included familial betrayal in this grand society, which could be used to emphasize themes such as justice and honor. Like the Cid and the seven infantes, Abraham and even Haran is eventually betrayed by those nearest him. Terah is a keen idolater. When Abraham destroys his idols, as he does in the Jewish literature, Terah is so infuriated by what he perceives as his son's betrayal that he complains to the king and wants Abraham punished. The king, quite naturally, is furious that Terah disobeyed him those long years ago and did not kill Abraham as a child. To save his own skin, Terah lies that he acted on his elder son Haran's advice. As such, it is not just Abraham, but Haran who is to be cast into the fire by order of Nimrod. This royal drama moves us into the Jewish sources while simultaneously setting the stage for Jasher's main theme, not one of justice, honor, or vengeance, but of faith. Jasher adapts the story found in Genesis Rabbah that centers on Haran's personal faith and trust in God. This is done through a brief tangential note following Terah's lie that Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abraham, but kept it within himself, and Haran said in his heart, "Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did. And it shall come to pass, if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will go after the king." All of this is moot, as Haran is to be cast into the fire regardless. And because he is fickle, he is ultimately not saved. Hence, there can be no confusion why Haran is not spared while Abraham survived. For the author of Jasher, the key point is Abraham's perfect faith without a focus on his intuition like in the other traditions where Abraham deducts the truth about God from natural phenomena. This is made explicit when Abraham walks out of the fire unharmed and a shocked Nimrod asks how this is possible. Abraham's response is simple. The God of heaven and earth in whom I trust and who has all in his power, he delivered me from the fire into which thou didst cast me. Thus, this miracle is viewed by Abraham, and especially by the author of Jasher, as a direct result of his faith. However, the story ends with Abraham's life again being threatened, as Nimrod has a dream, which is interpreted to mean that Abraham is still a threat to his kingdom. Even after rewarding Abraham with riches and initially listening to his message, Nimrod again seeks Abraham's life, but Abraham was warned by a servant of the king, and he fled from the land. Without trying to draw the parallels too close, El Cid faces trials of faith and is rewarded by wicked kings who then turn on him again, like Abraham with Nimrod. These chivalric expansions to the ancient stories, as well as stories closer to the author's own time and place, tie multiple legends together to highlight Abraham's faithfulness. In so doing, the audience is invited to become like Abraham and strive to have the same faith Abraham has. They are also invited to reject the faith of Haran and Terah. Faithlessness or a refusal to firmly believe in the Lord only lead to disaster. And if this was not already clear to the reader, the faith of Abraham is one of those 13 virtues explicitly identified by the author of Jasher, as his faith can convince us of their fear of God. We would be remiss if we did not mention here the closest scriptural account Latter-day Saints have to the events described in Jasher, namely the Book of Abraham. The books of Abraham and Jasher are focused on Abraham's faith in the Lord and his rejection of the idolatrous gods of his father, though each text emphasizes this theme in different ways. Jasher reworks earlier traditions to situate Abraham and his family in the dramatic personal conflicts of the courtly world of the medieval Mediterranean, and, by the author's own admission in the prologue, seeks to contextualize this for his own audience. The Book of Abraham focuses entirely on the author's own faith, and like the Bible and pre-Islamic sources, makes no mentions of Abraham's childhood and birth. Furthermore, in Abraham, faithfulness is connected closely to the reception of the priesthood and its covenant blessings, whereas Jasher focuses on Abraham's study of Torah under trusted guides. Finally, in both texts, Abraham is offered as a sacrifice by order of a wicked king, though the king differs in each text. And as noted, the method of attempted murder varies in each text, though it is worth noting that while the subtext of a ritual sacrifice could be present in Genesis Rabbah and is explicit in Abraham, it is entirely absent from Jasher's later reworking. More important than the method, however, was the man Abraham. For Latter-day Saints, these stories, preserved and retold in Jasher, can help illuminate the ancient context behind the scriptural narrative. But they should not be confused as scriptural nor the source behind Scripture. Rather, one can read in Abraham a story of perfect faith, faith in the Lord, a desire for greater light and knowledge, a desire to receive all the blessings God has prepared for the faithful. This was especially manifest as Abraham is prepared to sacrifice his own life for the Lord rather than give in to the idolatrous world around him. Many of these same themes are found in the ancient traditions that Jasher adapts and shapes to likewise share a story of Abraham as a man of perfect faith. We would draw your attention to this illustration from a 1923 German edition of Jasher. This is a rather clever design that gets straight to Jasher's meaning. Abraham is the man of perfect faith and takes up the highest position in the composition. He shines with light and assumes a peaceful prayer stance amidst the fire. The viewer's gaze is directed upwards at him. The dark, surly figure bunched up on the left is the wicked king Nimrod, perverting the ways of the Lord. In the middle, you have the smaller figure of Haran being killed by the flames because, although not wicked, he was not righteous and could not make up his mind whom to serve. He's falling backwards to Nimrod. The message is clear. Indecision is not righteousness. The legends Jasher incorporates are varied and wide-reaching throughout the text. Many of these, such as the tradition of Abraham being cast into the fiery furnace, date exceptionally early, at least to the early centuries AD, perhaps even earlier. While these traditions are reworked into a story entirely at home in the late medieval world of kings and their courts, the author of Jasher showed great care in highlighting what he believed were key characteristics and themes that could help his audience connect with and cherish their shared past. The value of Jasher is not in its supposed antiquity, but in its author's perceptive sensitivity as an artist and reworker of traditional material. Jasher is a wonderful legacy of the late medieval mind with deep roots in the past. In the case of Abraham, it is especially a poignant case of how Jews in the 15th and 16th centuries viewed Abraham in their own times of crisis. He was a hero and a champion of faith. When confronted with trials of faith from the earliest days of his life, Abraham consistently sought the blessings of his fathers in communion with God. This is a timeless message that all members of the Abrahamic faiths can recognize and unite behind, as they likewise strive to emulate that faith and approach God. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you both for your wonderful presentation. The first question. A recent book has argued that the Book of Jasher was found on the plates of brass mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Is there any validity to this claim?
To quote Cyrus Gordon, as mentioned earlier, there are some people who are right and some people who are still catching up. That would be a claim where the author would still be catching up. Unless the brass plates were written in the 16th century and somehow sent back in time to 600 BC, there's just no possible way.
Can I add? Yeah, the other thing we'd like to point out is that the Book of Jasher is a unified text. It comes from the hands of one author who utilized all sorts of sources. Some are ancient, some are a lot more recent. You have Rashi, and in Jasher's telling of Abraham, unlike in Genesis Rabbah where he uses a stick or a club, he uses an axe or hatchet, just like in the Quranic version. And all of these are indications that it comes later. Some of the traditions are earlier, but we don't know how early.
Thank you. Well said. All right, second question. Joseph said the son of Jacob seems to follow the same stories of chivalric adventure. Does the Joseph of the Book of Jasher get a similar treatment? You want to take this one?
I can.
So we originally actually wanted to focus a lot on Joseph. For the theme of the conference, we pivoted to Abraham. But the Joseph cycle in Jasher is one of its biggest chivalric episodes, and it's heavily expanded, and it's definitely worth reading in that light.
Thank you, both of you. One more round of applause.